Okay, let's try this again, since my microphone was not working, but it seems to be back now, so... Alright, we're back. We're building Bilbo, and I added all of the text yesterday and today, and then did a count, and we are at 318 cards. That means we need to cut 18 cards, then for all the remaining cards, for every 5 of them, we have to cut 4. Bilbo is actually actively nuts for how many cards he has on him. This is what it used to look like before I got better at doing this, and because I was kind of unsure exactly what I wanted to do with Bilbo, like I had an idea, but I kept adding cards that technically function the deck, but aren't what we were going for. There's a lot of cards, so there should be a lot of them that are relatively easy to cut, but I got a feeling somewhere between 200 and 120, this deck's going to be obscenely hard to make cuts for, so let's get started. So, just to be clear, what we're actually doing with Bilbo. So, Bilbo increases life gain by 1. So, if you would gain that much life, you gain that much life plus 1 instead. He's a replacement effect, so if I would gain 1 life, I gain 2. All the other effects that are similar to that are also replacement effects, so each time a replacement effect is applied to an effect, you can then check and see if the other replacement effects still qualify and keep replacing them until you've replaced each one of them once. So, if I have gain, twice as much life when I would gain life instead, and I have Bilbo out, I can have Bilbo replace the life gain first to add the additional 1, and then replace the doubling, or replace the life gain with the double life gain to have it gain that much life plus 2, because Bilbo's is now doubled. If I wanted to gain 1 less life, we could double the life total I would gain first, and then add the extra 1 for Bilbo. So, that is an option with replacement effects, but each replacement effect can only apply to the thing it applies to once. So, if something else is going to change how much life I gain, then Bilbo can't apply to that afterwards and increase it again by 1. So our goal is not actually to get to the 111 life and put all of our creatures from our deck into play. Our goal is to outlast the opponents and to win the game by either grinding them so slowly and methodically until there is nothing left for them to use to win the game, or to make them give up out of frustration because there's no way we are dying anytime soon, and this game is just a absolute slog at that point. So, that is the actual goal. Like, I wanted to build a deck like this for a while, and I was waiting for the right commander for it, and Bilbo seems like a good choice because of the extra life gain attached to him. Like, he's a life gain matters commander, so that's what we're going to build around. So cards that actively win me the game by gaining life are probably not something that I want to play in the deck. Like, Archangel of Thune is on the list, but it probably shouldn't be. Like, its whole purpose is to turn life gain into extra damage from my creatures attacking, and that's not what this deck needs. Now, granted, if we can win the game by doing damage, we'll just win the game. Like, there's no point in intentionally dragging it out and playing poorly and giving players other time, more time to win the game when we could win it. So, because of that, I'm going to be a little bit more picky about certain cards that are paying us off for gaining life in ways that punish the opponent so much that they might die, where they don't have a ton of control over that. Like, I can put Sheoldred in, and every time they draw cards, they're going to lose more life, but Sheoldred's in there to gain me life when I draw cards, primarily, and to punish them so that way they draw less cards, because they don't want to die from Sheoldred, ideally. Or at least to make it so that drawing the extra cards puts them in a bad spot. So, but some cards that, like I said, the Archangel's an excellent example, because it just makes it so my creatures kill them faster, and that's not really what I want from the deck. We also, most of our removal, especially targeted removal, is going to exile the things that it hits. so that way, even if the opponent has recursion, they're not going to have the resources to put back into their deck or into their hand or into play in order to kill us in a long, grindy game. Like, we're just going to keep taking away things they had to work with and try to put as many of our things back into our deck as possible when we can, so that way they just keep losing resources the longer the game goes on, and eventually we grind them down to nothing if they insist on playing it out. So that is the type of deck that we're going to play. So the question then becomes, well, what can we, what do we need in order to do that versus what isn't actually helping that game plan? Excuse me. So, I'm going to take this first pass, and I'm looking for cards that now don't fit the requirements for the deck and cut them immediately. We probably don't need Reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is useful when we need to attack somebody to get in some amount of damage, like damage a Planeswalker or get our lifelink creatures in. And, they have blockers, but we can untap all of the ones that get blocked and remove them from combat, so they're not dying anymore and we're not losing our creatures just to gain life. But maybe that one can come out. No Mercy, Phyrexian Reclamation. There are a lot of cards I have on the list that allow us to convert life into other resources. Things like Necropotence, Greed, Sylvan Library. Phyrexian Reclamation lets us turn them into the creatures that have gone to our graveyard. Because there are a lot of things that trigger for us having creatures come into play and having creatures die. So, or having creatures attack, for that matter. Like, having creatures do things seems to be the primary way of gaining life in this deck, followed by similar effects for lands and artifacts, but in less quantity for the deck. So, treatment, Righteous Cause. So right now I'm looking for the cards that just straight up don't do the thing at all that we're trying to do, and we'll get rid of them. Then we'll start focusing on the cards that aren't doing the thing very well. Yeah, I don't think we're actually going to need Retaliate. We have a bunch of other cards that do this effect constantly, or that can deal with creatures that, just our opponent's creatures that are attacking us, creatures that dealt damage to us, things like that. So we don't necessarily need Retaliate because of that. It's fun to ambush opponents because we'll have so much life that they'll go, well, while you're not protected by, No Mercy effect, I might as well get some damage in, and then we cast this and we wind up destroying all the creatures that hit me. That's fine, but I think we can do better than that. Right now, Kami of False Hopes and Spore Frog are on the list because we have ways to get back one CMC or one or less power creatures in multiple card effects. So we'll have to see which ones of those we actually want to keep in the deck. Intel. Seed the Land. Seed the Land is in here right now because we have a bunch of cards that gain us life for our opponent's creatures coming into play, or attacking, or dying. So giving them a bunch of random 1/1 tokens when they landfall isn't a huge deal. If we decide to play this card, we probably want the Mirror Maker also, whatever it's called, that does this whenever a player plays a creature spell. Court of Calling, Dark Confidant, Privileged Position is fine for right now. Ghostway, Leyline, Stormherd. Stormherd might get cut primarily because it gives us so many creatures we might just kill the opponents with the sheer number of creatures we get. But at the same time, it's giving us a number of creatures equal to our life total. So anything that gains us life when a creature comes into play is literally going to double or triple our life total by casting this. And that's a lot of potential chump blockers in addition to potential attackers. So it's probably a card that wins us the game when we cast it, and opponents don't wrath before we untap. It's also a little bit dangerous with cards like Massacre Worm, where we'll take a massive hit and lose twice as much. Like, whatever our life total was at the time we cast that, we're going to lose twice that much, so we need to gain at least 3 times that much, which is very doable in this deck. It's literally any Soul Warden effect and Bilbo at the same time will do it, or any 2 Soul Wardens will do it, or anything triggering from our creatures dying, since we'll assume the Massacre Worm is the active player trigger, so the non-active player triggers from all of our stuff dying will go on the stack on top of that and gain us life, potentially, too. Martyr of Sands is fine for right now. Proclamation of Rebirth is another, hey, I can get back one of my cheap creatures every turn. I think we skipped over the Caretaker of Shizo, and that might make the list if we keep that many 1-drop creatures in the deck. We'll have to see how many we're running, though. Yeah, I'm already trying to add more cards into this deck list when we need to make cuts right now. Sets Tiger. We might be able to cut cards like Sets Tiger. Like, yes, it stops us from taking a ton of damage, but since it's preventing the damage rather than gaining us life based on the amount of damage we took or something along those lines, it stops Dread, No Mercy, and Michiko from triggering, so it actually takes away from our abilities to punish the opponents for trying to kill us. Which I suppose means it can go. Like, we already have enough cards like it where we can prevent damage if we need to. Revel Arc, Boon Reflection, obviously. Cauldron of Souls. The Cauldron works because right now Solemnity's on the list, but a lot of our creatures are too small for Cauldron. So if we wind up cutting Solemnity and or Malera, then we have to cut Cauldron also. Looted Bonds, Woodfall Primus, Archon of Justice, Death Greeter, Ranger of Eos, Lapse of Certainty, Path, Wall. Yeah, I'm looking at cards like, I want to be able to attack the opponent's hand, but I don't know that the cards we have Identity Crisis, Raven Man, the Yarok's Fenlurker, and like I think 1 or 2 other cards that can exile multiple cards from the opponent's hand. But that's it, and I don't know if that's worth keeping at that point. Elspeth, Exsanguinate, Journal. Yeah, Norn is more like, she's in here to stop the opponent's creatures from being big enough to kill us, but the massive pump to all of our creatures is probably just going to kill opponents, and that's not what we're trying to do, so I think Norn can go. Mentor of the Meek, Nevermore, Avacyn, Blood Artist, Closet, Exquisite Blood, Sigarda, Stani, Blind Obedience, Innate Primordial. I think Eviction can go. I think Farewell is, like, just better than it for the most part. And we already have Farewell and Perilous Vault, or whatever it's called, on the list as mass exile effects. So I don't think we need Eviction also. We're probably going to wind up cutting Ready and Willing. It's interesting because it lets us give our creatures indestructible to block with, and or Death Touch and Lifelink. So suddenly being able to block all of our opponent's creatures, but I think we have enough stuff that punishes them for trying to kill us in the first place that we don't need another thing at instant speed as a one-shot. Whip of Erebos, Crucifix, Metria, Ethrios. Like, they're fine. They might not make it, though. But at least they're on topic for the deck. The retreats are basically landfall. I can gain life. Like, the black one drains each opponent, and I gain a life. And the green one lets me gain 2 life. And then they have other modes, but they're primarily in there because they functionally gain me life for landfall triggers. I'll have to see if they make it or not. Like, Courser of Crucifix is probably the best one since it's letting me play extra land from the deck. We probably don't need Bygone Bishop. There are some benefits to making an artifact token. Chatterfang letting me make a creature token when I do that, and Pippin, full name Pippin, the mono green one, letting me make a food token when I make another token. And most of my creatures are this small. Also, we have like the Fangren that lets me gain 5 life when an artifact dies. Still, I think we have enough effects like this. We have like Mentor the Meek, Welcoming Vampire, and this guy. And the mana intensity of having to pay to sacrifice the clue tokens might be just a tiny bit much. I don't know. Maybe I want to cut the Welcoming Vampire instead because it's only once per turn. Bruna is just, we get back an angel or a human, and that's neat, but it's not necessary. We do have a lot of angels and humans in the deck, but that's not the only things we have. Bull, Panharmonicon, Heroic Intervention is fine for now. Dust to Dawn is another Wrath that doesn't hit little guys. I don't know that we're going to get there on Gideon. I think Gideon of the Trials is the only Gideon that made the list. And at that point, if that is the case, I'm not going to be able to bother running him. I don't think. Solemnity, Ashes the Abhorrent, Landing, Settle the Wreckage, Verdant Sun's Avatar, Vona, Sworn Vampire, Twilight Prophet. Yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and cut Evra. Like, it's a cute trick, but it is so dangerous to do. Dawn of Hope, March of the Multitudes, Ethereal Absolution. Yeah, I think I like Ethereal Absolution more than Norn. It also weakens all the opponent's creatures, but it also lets me exile cards from their graveyard to make 1/1s, potentially. It's probably still going to wind up being a cut. Oh, hey, I never put the game text for Revival Revenge on. Hey, real quick. Because I forget exactly what the wording on. I know it's like somebody loses half their life and I gain life, but Revival. Oh, Revival. There it is. So, Revival is return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from graveyard to the battlefield. And Revenge is double my life total. Target opponent loses half their life rounded up. I don't super care about either of these effects. Like, yes, they were on topic for the deck. Like, doubling my life total is a cool thing to do, but I think we're just safe to cut that. We're currently at 8 cards cut out of the 300 and something. Hey, keep going. Goose, Revenge of Ravens. For the Pantheon, Daxos, Nexus Wardens. Reach, Eerie Ultimatum, Luminous Broodmoth. Goose, Nethroi. Cosmos Elixir. Non-land permanent, and I can cast legendary stuff. Harbinger. Accomplished Alchemist, Beladros Witherbloom, Honor Troll, Mortality Spear, Professor Onyx, Edgemore Witch, Will, Cleric Class, Guardian of Faith, Exalted Deeds, Chelisara, Lisa, Luminarch Veteran, Guard of Splendor, Meathook Massacre, Heron of Hope. Heron of Hope's probably getting cut because it's a 4 mana 2/3 flyer, so even with the extra life gain, it's kind of meh. Plus, Goldred, Knight of Dawn. Yeah, we probably don't need the Silverback Elder. Super medium. 9 cards cut. I draw my second card. Each opponent loses 2 life and I gain 2 life. When this dies, I get a creature with CMC 3 or less back. Fire Might is fine because it's exiling artifacts and artifacts and enchantments that aren't creatures, and it gains me 2 life when it does that, so. Or goes away, or bounces, or flickers, or anything, so. To Ashes, Spectrum Sentinel. Fiends is fine because she doubles up my life total gain triggers. I don't know that we need Calyx. I have a bunch of powerful enchantments on the list, but he's going to be, like, I didn't wind up running the +3/+3 and double my life total when it connects Aura, and I don't think I have that many others, so it's only him and enchanted creatures I control. Like, my other enchantment creatures don't count, so. Excuse me. Since we're only running like 1 or 2 Ajanis and like a Karn and a whatnot, like 1 Gideon, Deification was on the list in case we wound up running the Gideon of the Trials, like multiple Gideons, to take advantage of the Trials emblem. That can go. Condor, Lotho is fine. Peregrine Took's fine. Reprieve. Battle of Bywater, the One Ring. Fury, Grim Tutor, Acidic Slime. Cultivate, Dark Tutelage. Elixir, Sarah, Jade Mage. Angelic Accord, yeah, the Archangel can go. That's like my prime example of a card that's very good in a life gain deck that is not good with how we're trying to play life gain, so. Careless Vault. We probably don't need the Ajani's Welcome, it's just the enchantment version of the Soul Wardens, but only the ones that only gain me life when my creatures come in, so. It's not even, like, it doesn't even have the benefit of gaining me life when my opponent's creatures come in. Splendid Angle. Splendid Angel. Strength of the Pride, Angel of Vitality, Bishop of Wings, Lurker, Idol of Endurance, Council's Judgment, Recruiter of the Guard, Thrilling Encore. Yeah, see, Answered Prayers is an Ajani's Welcome that also turns into a 3/3 flyer, but also costs 3 times as much mana, so. Can't see me shrugging at it, but I am shrugging at it. Esperlark, Winds of Abandon, Fighting Grace, Chatterfang, Solitude, Sithis, Visioner, Asterion, Stock, Acrobatics, Soul Snare, Martyr's Bond, Darksteel Mutation, Mystic Barrier, Dire Hour, Song of the Dryads, Karlov, Reclamation, Protection, Judgment, Maneuver. We have Obscuring Haze on the list. Bane Witch, Black Market Connections, Glasscast Heart, Grand Crescendo, Ceremony, Smuggler's Share, Clever Concealment. Definitely want the Gaffer. Like, if I gain 3 life, I draw a card each turn. Seems pretty good. Prize Pig seems like it'll be insane in this deck, if, like, just for the ramp potential this card has. Tallyman of Nurgle, Commissar, Neil, Witch of the Moors, Distinguished Conjurer, Preston, Bloodsucker, Rodolph. Yeah, we probably don't need the Complaints Clerk or the Discourtesy Clerk. There are enough attractions that they could function, and we have enough ways to blink them that they would be the only attraction enablers we would need, but for the most part, they're underwhelming. Alright, I'm leaving Ratchet on, but I want to copy him to see how many things I add. So we had 15 on this list by the end of it, so we are not even below 300 yet. This is gonna be a thing. Alright, so we cut out a whole bunch of stuff that just doesn't work in the deck. Now for the hard part of figuring out what stuff isn't good enough for the deck. Probably don't need Zoran Orb. Like, it lets us sacrifice our lands to gain life. I would rather gain life for lands going to the graveyard. So that way I gain life when somebody Armageddons or something. And this way, it's another thing that Mindslaver... Like, this deck is actually super vulnerable to Mindslaver because it has a ton of ways to pay life to do things, and a ton of ways to sacrifice our things for life gain and or card draw, so... Yeah, we die pretty hard to a Mindslaver effect. Like, we have so many things that would let us pay all of our life in 1 life increments to just die. I don't need the Reconnaissance. I was already saying that when we saw it before. All space is fine. No Mercy, Reclamation, Granger, Replenish. We have other things that are like Moonlit Wake, including Ashes of the Abhorrent, so we don't need Wake itself. Might wind up cutting Noble Purpose. It does help that our creatures can block and gain a ton of life for blocking, especially if they have lifelink on top of this or something else is going on to increase the life gain, but I could see cutting it. Righteous Cause is good because it doesn't care who's attacking and who's defending at the time, so if one of our opponents attacks another one of our opponents, we just gain life for each creature they attack with. We probably don't need the Edgewalker. Most of our clerics are pretty cheap. So making, like, there's no infinite combo for life gain in this deck, I don't think, that's enabled by our creatures costing 0 mana right now. And if there is, I don't think we necessarily need it. Hallow might be too narrow. Like, the idea of stopping Blasphemous Act just makes me giddy inside, and that is a card you will see very often in Commander, to the point where I might still kind of want it, literally just for that, but the fact that it's that narrow is probably enough. Also, the fact that I only gain life based on the damage prevented, like, if I gained life equal to the amount of damage that spell would deal regardless, this would be fine against like X spells that can't be countered and the damage can't be prevented. Like if I just took 100-point Banefire to the face, but I also gained 100 life because of this effect, that would be worth it. But since it doesn't work that way, that's another reason to cut it. So we need a ton of cuts. So if the card is kind of questionable at this point, I should probably be taking it off the list. Crucible, Eternal Witness, Arbiter. The Crucible can still stay because we have all the fetch lands and the life gain triggers from landfalls, so we can actually net gain life even though we're cracking the 1 damage fetch lands repeatedly. Stays top. I suppose we can keep the Patron for right now. I can see cutting it though. Like, it's similar to the Noble Purpose where I'm gaining life when the opponents attack. And it doesn't matter if they're attacking me or not. Runetail actually that? Like, I feel like he's non-combat damage for some reason. Put a hyphen for Runetail. There he is. Rend all damage will be... No, it's all damage will be dealt to creatures. So combat damage, effect damage. Yeah, I guess he stays then. That's a bit too easily done and too good a defensive trick. Probably don't need Debtors now. Like, I'm already trying to exile my opponent's stuff, and I get my stuff back way cheaper than this with a bunch of other cards in the deck. The fact that I'm trying to exile opponents' graveyards or stop their creatures from getting to the graveyard so that way I get around certain things, so that way we can keep reducing their resources in a long, drawn-out game, means that we probably don't need that. We have mostly white cards, and the Cleric gains a ton of life. If we were mono white, I would probably keep the Martyr of the Sands, because Martyr Proclamation, which are the 2 cards right next to each other, was like a huge deal in Standard, specifically for how much life you could gain every turn. Angel's Grace stays because it shuts off insta-win conditions and buys me time against other things that would kill me. Mischief, Rift Sweeper. Rift Sweeper and Pull from Eternity are here to get me back cards that have been exiled, that, like, if the opponent is also trying to exile a lot of our stuff to stop recursion and to eventually deck me out, I would like ways to get back the cards that have been exiled if I can. So those 2 are on the list for that. We might not have room for them. We might just have to go without. Yeah, Purity I think falls in the same problem as Hallow, but it doesn't save my creatures from things, so I guess we can probably cut that one too. Bitter Blossom, Tutor, Revelark, Boon Reflection, Cauldron, Fracturing Gust, Kitchen Finks. The Oracle is a fine mana sink, but I don't know that we actually need it. Like, I'm gaining life from so many things, but just being able to tap all of my mana every turn to gain that much life, -1 also, since it's green-white hybrid in X, gain X life. That just feels like something I should be running as a way to, I can't do anything else this turn, might as well just gain, 10, 20, 40 life, depending on what modifiers I have. Path to Exile, Wall of Reverence. A lot of my creatures are small. The Wall of Reverence is probably too mediocre. Like, it blocks okay a lot of the time, but that doesn't seem essential. I need my opponents to lose life, and I'm not aggressively attacking them a lot of the time. We have cards that would turn this on, like Sheoldred and Polluted Bonds and whatnot, but I do like the idea of gaining 2 life every time an opponent's card goes to the graveyard from anywhere, Like, that just seems like another way to gain a ton of life quickly, but. And puts them into a bad spot where they can't afford to let their cards go to the graveyard. But on the other hand, I also exile a lot of their stuff, including exiling instead of letting the cards go to the graveyard sometimes, so there's a lot of times where their cards would never hit the yard for it to trigger. Closet, Exquisite Blood. Exquisite Blood is one of those enchantments that freaks people out because they're always expecting the when I gain life, they lose some amount of life, infinite loops. And I'm not actively attacking opponents a lot of the time, although I do have ways to damage them, and gaining twice as much life as the damage they're taking does sound like fun. But on the other hand, it is one of those things where if I'm thinking about cutting it, I probably need to cut it. Because we have so many cards on this list. We do not have room for most of them. Do I need the Pontiff? I do have a lot of little creatures, and he's another mana sink for that. Like, if I cast a cheap spell, I get to drain for every creature I have in play that I want to spend a mana on. I guess he can stay for right now, but I could see cutting him. Karametra is a 5-drop that lets me ramp when I cast a creature. I don't think we need that. I'm thinking we might be able to cut both of the gods, like both her and Athreos. Athreos is fine because it makes the opponents pay the 3 life, but we're not pressuring their life total enough where they can't just pay the 3 life a lot of the time, so they just won't give me my creature back and they'll be losing 3 life, and I don't care about killing them with damage, so having them lose 3 life isn't helping me. Ceaseless Hunger. Ceaseless Hunger we can probably cut. Like, the Infinite Gear we want to keep because it shuffles my graveyard back in when it goes to the graveyard, so it's another way to stop me from decking out. But we already have a bunch of those. Like, Ulamog Ceaseless Hunger is in because he exiles the things when you cast him, but we have a bunch of other stuff that exiles that's, like, cheaper than him. Almost all of our removal exiles or is a mass removal spell of some kind, so. We have a bunch of flicker effects, and I don't think we have enough colorless sources for the Displacer. So I think we can go ahead and cut that. It is repeatable if we have colorless sources, but there aren't a ton of those on the list right now. 15 cuts. So we already cut more cards going by things I don't think we 100% need than we did by cutting things that just shouldn't have been on the list in the first place. Aether Flux feels like if I have it, I'm going to wind up killing people with it a lot of the time because I'm just gaining too much life. And the amount of extra life I gain from looping spells or something isn't going to be as big a deal. So it's basically a way to win the game that I don't want to use. So, and the life gain aspect of it isn't helping as much. So that probably should have went the first time. That fell into the first category of things we were cutting. We need Razaketh. We have a ton of token makers, and we have a ton of life gain, so once Razaketh gets into play, we can sacrifice a whole bunch of things and pay a whole bunch of life to tutor a grip full of cards that will let us win the game, basically, through almost anything. It does feel like, though, if I have a win con at that point, I need to go get it, as opposed to the no-lose con that I'm going for instead. But maybe. We'll leave him on the list for right now. So Verdant Sun's avatar is just a very big my creature's only Soul Warden, and most of my creatures are, like 1 to 3 toughness anyway. So I don't think we need the Verdant Sun's avatar. Vona stays in. Oathsworn Vampire's fine. Twilight Prophet for right now. Lyra does give my angels lifelink and a power and toughness boost. I don't know that I need that, though. I have enough angels on the list that might be relevant. But I also have enough angels on the list that might get our opponents killed by having a bunch of buffed up flying angels. I wonder if I cut Shalai because I have a bunch of other cards that are doing this for the Shroud or Hexproof variant, rather. But she's also a win con by paying 6 mana when I have a ton of creatures out. The hardest part about this deck is not accidentally winning the game any other way, and we're going to have that happen a reasonable amount of the time just because we have so many good cards and we're not dying, so our opponents are just going to die from damage because we have successfully not died for 30 turns now, and we still have an army of creatures that needs answering again, and all of their stuff just keeps getting exiled. We probably don't need the Absolution. Also, as a fun side note, I have a bunch of cards that kill big creatures, so if I leave things like Ethereal Absolution in there, it actually hurts them, like Battle of Bywater. Would make our opponent's creatures small enough, like the ones that are right on the cusp would live now instead of dying, and ours that were close will now die instead of living, so that's kind of a double whammy for that card. For the Pantheon. We did cut 2 of the gods, and that leaves us with 1 demigod in Daxos, who's probably going to stay. So, Godless Shrine, Born of the Gods, Altar of the Pantheon, and Daxos. Yeah, okay, so Altar of the Pantheon can go. We've cut the other 2 gods. So it's no longer gaining us life, and we no longer care about devotion. And those are the 2 benefits to running it. Primarily that I would gain life. I don't think I have that many legendary enchantments either, since most of them would be gods or demigods anyway. Let's see. If we do enchants, we get a whole big number, but I don't think any of them are legendary. Cleric class isn't, Swarming isn't, Circle isn't, Splendor isn't. Beathook Massacre is, so that's 1. Rabble Rousing isn't. Tear Asunder, no. Might, no. Tutelage, no. Board, no. Prayers, Abiding Grace. Wait, is she I thought she was an enchantment nymph. Is Scythus an enchantment nymph? Yeah, she is. So that would be 2. Missed that. That's 2 so far. Darksteel Mutation, Mystic Barrier, Song of Dryads, Reclamation, Black Market Connections, Smuggler's Share, Greed, Library, Necro, Grim Feast, Righteous Aura, Contemplation, Survival. Contemplation could probably go. Like, I have a ton of spells, but most of the spells I'm casting will gain me life anyway by virtue of other things. And it's a 3 mana enchantment. Oops, what was this one? Survival, right? No Mercy, Reclamation, Noble Purpose, Aura Shards, Arena, Righteous Cause. Is Runetail legendary when he's on his backside? Or flipped upside down? Probably. Legendary enchantment. Yep. Okay, so when he's flipped, he works. So that's 4 now. Blind Obedience. Bow of Nylea is 5. Whip of Erebos is 6. So we have like 6 hits for this thing. I still don't think that's enough. It's a bit closer than I originally gave it credit for, but yeah, with only 6 hits for it, I don't think it's quite good enough. We have a lot of enchantments. We have, like, of this 60, I think something like 50 of them are actually enchantments as opposed to things that affect enchantments or mention enchantments in their game text, like Barrier Breach here. But not all of them are going to make it. I guess we give him a few more passes, like we hit other stuff that's definitely not going to make it, and then we come back to him. Alchemist, Beladros Witherbloom, Honor Troll, Mortality Spear. Professor Onyx is fine for right now. We'll have to see exactly how many instants and sorceries I'm running, whether or not Professor Onyx stays in. Cleric class, Priest of Ancient Lore. Okay, I skipped over the witch. Give a player 2/1 Inkling. Player draws a card and loses a life, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature. He's on here because we can draw the card and lose a life and give somebody a 2/1, and we probably gain a ton of life for giving them a 2/1. So we don't really care. But that's still kind of medium. Okay, that's 21 cuts. So I think I'm going to pop up here. So 302 to 82. Roll. No, we were definitely past Razaketh. Access, Lurus, Nethroy. Ancient Lore, Prosperous Innkeeper. We might be able to cut the Innkeeper. It gives us 1 treasure, and it's my other creatures, not each other creature. Uni cuts. And I feel like I have a couple others on the list that are my creatures, not everybody's, and I'd rather have them like one-shot mana dork effect. Plus, him making a token it sets up Chatterfang and Peregrine Took, so. Do I want an Ajani's Pride Mate that lets me scry also? Maybe, probably not. We probably don't need the veteran. If it was coming and going without having to be either or, I'd be a lot more interested in him, but as it stands. Don't necessarily need him. Heron of Hope is just too underwhelming. We have like 3 or 4 other cards that are increasing our life gain by 1, and then 2 other cards that are increasing it by twice as much. So I don't think we need him also. Purifier's okay. Welcoming Vampire, the whole once per turn thing. Like, I can almost definitely draw a card every turn cycle, but I don't have a ton of things that put a low power creature into play at instant speed. I think it's just the Soldier Maker and like Jade Mage and a couple other activate abilities, or getting a creature like a trigger on another player's turn, like if I blink one of my creatures on their turn, that sort of thing. So do I not want the Welcoming Vampire then? I think we can afford to cut that. Aspiring Overseer, Rabble Rousing. Rabble Rousing requires us to attack, but at the same time, if the creatures are small enough, I don't mind attacking with them to generate a ton of value by getting all those comes into play triggers. Raven Man's a bit weak. I could see him winding up being one of the cuts. But I do still like the idea of being like, if we're going to have the game go super long, I want a repeatable way to take cards away from other players. And so far, it's Raven Man and Blinking the Fenlurker are my primary 2 ways of going about that. I like that Horn of Gondor is exponential, and human is one of the more common creature types in the deck, but we might wind up cutting it because it's not... Like, we might only wind up with like 10 or 15 humans in the deck by the end of this, and at that point the Horn starts looking a lot weaker because we won't have a human to replace the none that we have once the Horn gets killed. The upside, though, is that the Horn is a blink target for Teleportation Circle, so that kind of works in our favor as a reason to keep it. I probably don't need the Orbs of Warding. Like, preventing 1 point of damage per creature is fine, but not essential. We should be able to gain enough life where we don't care. Like, if we get hit by... Unless we're getting hit by 51 ones, like... I don't think I care if I take, like, if I'm getting hit by 52 twos, yes, I'd rather take 50 less damage, but we can probably still tank that, so... We also probably don't need the Council's Judgment. Like, we have less control over what gets exiled with it, and we have so much other things going on. I'm debating if I want to get rid of the Thrilling Encore. I've got a bunch of ways to save my creatures from randomly dying to board sweepers, and I'm exiling so many of our opponents' things for going to the graveyard, or instead of letting them go to the graveyard, that we probably won't be able to get their stuff either. So... yeah, Answer Prayers is a 3-mana a Johnny's Welcome that turns into a 3/3, and I don't care about the 3/3, so that can just go. So Abandon, Shatterfang, Solitude. Alright, we're just about at the hour mark. So let me copy a card, see how many we have on the list. That added 8, so we have 7. Oh, we had a few more, but okay. That's 7 more cuts. So down to 75. Alright, we made a little bit of headway, but we're at the hour mark, and I won't have enough time to do another hour-long stream before I have to go to work, so I'm going to call it here for right now. We'll work more on this tomorrow, and then we'll probably do some drafting too. Now that 16 is done, I have more time to devote to anything else. But yeah, that's going to do it for me for right now. So thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time. Have a good rest of your day.